What's up, and welcome back to Talking Nutrition. Today, I want to share something from our group coaching program. Our office hours from June 1st. So every single week on Wednesday, we go live for a full hour. We do a Zoom call with our group coaching members, and we dive deeper into topics, right? So this week, we talked about going on shorter trips and longer trips, maybe with the family, your friends, and how you want to manage your nutrition around the time, your periodization, but also on those days itself. Like, are you going to be tracking? Maybe not. Are you going to be just focusing on steps, those kind of things. We talked about non-exercise activity, exercising during a cut, like how much should you be training? Is it going to be for muscle gain or fat loss, or are you going to be maintaining muscle for the most part? Like, how will you adjust your training based on your phases? We talked about calorie cycling, which is a really cool one, and I think we want to do something like a calorie cycling thing sometime maybe next month or over the next couple of months within our community as well, which I think would be really cool. It's kind of like a challenge, like giving people like a new tool to play with. I think calorie cycling could be a useful one for some people, but we'll talk about that, and that's going to be members only. So if you do want to learn more about that, I'll make sure to drop the link down below. Either way, I think we've created a really cool community where I've seen people support each other, share their struggles, and the cool thing is too, that because it's in a group setting, when our members ask questions, like not only can I address it, they can all chip in and then share their experiences. There's one thing that I think it's super cool to see, but a lot of people, are going through a little bit of a weird time in the beginning where all of a sudden they have to eat more than they expect, even though their weight loss goal is the main priority kind of thing. But we always want to get them started like at maintenance, or at least close to maintenance, right? Just to see where we expect our maintenance to be. But we get them to a place where all of a sudden they feel like they're eating more right now, right? And it's a little scary, and the weight fluctuations, they happen every single day, and people kind of freak out a little bit in the beginning. But then over time, right, usually it's kind of like 2-3 weeks in, they start to notice like, hey, like I'm getting compliments, I'm losing, body fat, like my measurements are going down, like the scale's not changing, but my measurements are. I'm dropping pan sizes. And this is all for some people, like after being stuck for years, you know what I mean? Which is super cool. So in a short time, they're noticing all these things already inside of a group program, but now they get to share that with new people who are coming in. And I think that's so cool, because now they're not like the first people anymore, you know what I mean? So when now someone comes in and they're like, hey, I'm feeling uncomfortable, I need to eat a little bit more, or maybe these kind of things are weird, and what about the weight, blah, blah, blah. And then they'll probably get like a message from someone else and be like, hey, you know what? I went through the same thing. Don't worry about it. You can always just pick it up. Like if you do have a day where you kind of like overshoot or undereat, whatever, but you'll see like over the course of the next couple of weeks, usually you start to feel better, you get into a better place, and then your results will start to kind of like really, the snowball begins to roll and you get that momentum, you know what I mean? So I think it's super cool. So I just want to share this, and I want to, do a huge shout out towards our members, because I think it's so cool to see everyone support each other, and just do this together. So if you're interested, I'll drop the link down below. And without further ado, let's get into the office hours recording from June 1st. Enjoy. So let's see. Weekly wins. First of all, I always want to start with the wins, right? The good shit. We got a couple. Weekly win from Dave. Compliments that it looks smaller but more fit. Love that. That's super cool. And that's kind of like the things we want to look for, right? So especially in the beginning, and Dave has been on for 3-ish weeks now. Just about 3, 4. Yeah, 3. And we are still working on introducing calories, kind of getting things consistent. We just did the periodization plan. We're now going to get into the perfect day of eating, those kind of things. And especially in the beginning, and I've talked about this a lot, but especially in the beginning, it's a lot of kind of like laying that foundation, right? And then eventually results start to take off. So it's really cool to already notice that in a short time, where people are noticing that. And that is the shit you want to look out for, because I think a lot of times we look in the mirror and we're like, oh, I don't notice anything. But guess what? Someone else might notice when, you see your friend who you haven't seen in a couple of weeks, and they will actually tell. But you see yourself in the mirror every single day. So those tiny little changes, you don't always notice them. And that's exactly why we take photos every single month. Now, Samantha says, I took the time to do personal growth work this week, and I journaled the things that I think will help me reach my personal goals for physical and mental health. I'm a big fan of journaling. I do it every single day, right? Once again, I have this little one here. It's where all my thoughts go. It's good. It's really helpful, and it's definitely helped me work through stuff in the past and currently, and I'm just a big fan of that, because I think a lot of times we kind of don't, we kind of like don't put it anywhere. You know what I mean? And that's great for even, like even speaking kind of like your goals into reality. Like that's also one way you could use journaling, because a lot of times we're not very confident in terms of like, I will reach my goals. You know what I mean? A lot of times it's like, well, I don't know, it's difficult, I don't really know what to do, and I'm not sure if I will get there, right? But here's the thing, I had those doubts too when I started coaching with so many other things, right? But here's the cool thing, you can literally, and I forgot the word for it, but you can speak it in the truth. You can tell yourself, right? And when you continuously do that, you'll start to believe that, and it really does work that way. It sounds weird, and no, you're not lying to yourself, but you're speaking it into reality by writing it down, by telling yourself, hey, this is something that I'm going to be doing. I am confident. I am successful, right? So work on that stuff. I think journaling is a huge one. Play around with it. Look for Ryan Holiday stuff. There's also the Monk Manual, which I did mention a couple office hours ago. There's a lot of good stuff there that you should look into, because I think it can be really, really beneficial to meditate, journal, and work through stuff that we typically kind of don't want to sit with. You know what I mean? I told this yesterday at the seminar too. Yes, it's confronting. It's uncomfortable, but it's also the thing that we need to do, because when we can create the awareness, we can then come up with a plan, right? Because we need to know what we need to change in order to actually make sure that we can change it. Lars says, my pants are feeling way looser, so I will have to get new ones soon. Super cool. And I also got a compliment by my coworker that they could see that I have lost weight. Yeah, awesome. And that's kind of like that confirmation of, hey, okay, cool, we're progressing, because yes, we have to scale. Yes, we have all those other things. But when people start to notice, you're like, okay, cool, I'm in a good place, So getting into the Tuesday Q&A post. So remember, right, every week I put this up. Ask away. The more you ask, the more you get. First question from Samantha. So I was listening to your podcast with Lisa Franz and found it really interesting. Towards the end, you both started talking about cardio, and I actually choose a 2-mile jog / spring ladder run today instead of doing cardio class. Okay, cool, awesome. Based on the podcast, I feel better about choosing the run over the class, but I'm wondering what your thoughts are about a 20 to 30 minute run, like 1 to 2 times a week, which is normal for me. But now I'm in a cut season. Cool. I hadn't given it much thought until I listened to the podcast, and I just And I just shortened my lifting sessions because I can feel them tiring me out while I'm taking a fewer calories in. Should I adjust my cardio for my cut season as well, or wait and see how the body responds? Really good question. So look at it this way. So we got cardio, right? And then we have building muscle, we have the weightlifting, and then we have cutting, right? So fat loss, we mostly do that through food. Does cardio and stuff play a role? I mean, yes, you can be burning more calories, but it's not going to be the main thing. And that's the biggest mistake a lot of programs and etc. make, right? It's right away, you go on low calories and you do crazy amounts of cardio. We do it a little differently, more sustainably, so that we can actually stick to it. Before I even explain, 20 to 30 minutes, a couple times a week, super good. Keep doing that. I think it's very good. You mentioned as well, it's kind of like a spring ladder. So jog, spring ladder, run. I think this sounds really good. Honestly, I would keep that in. It sounds really nice. And the thing is too, when you keep your cardio up, it's so important for your health, right? It's super important for your health, your cardiovascular health, your fitness overall, and it's going to allow your body to kind of recover better in between weightlifting sessions too, which is really cool. Not even between sessions, between sets. So that's really cool. We definitely want to be doing the cardio, and full transparency, I need to do a better job at that as well. But honestly, I would keep the 20 to 30 minutes a couple times a week in. Yeah, 100%. And especially because that seems to be something that you enjoy. Cool. Now, in the cut season, I also wouldn't really change it as much, to be honest with you. When we're looking at weightlifting and those kind of things, that's a signal to your body of, hey, we need to maintain these muscles. So training, right? Weightlifting during a cut is training to maintain. So remember that, train to maintain. all you're doing in terms of weightlifting during a fat loss phase is telling your body, we still need these muscles. Can you build muscle during a cut? You can, yes. It's just not very common. It's not to be expected to get a whole lot out of that. But you technically could. Thing is though, let's not expect it, because for the most part, it's at least going to be like a lot less. So let's train to maintain the muscle that we have. And the same kind of thing goes for performance. We're not looking to PR during a cut. However, right, performance, you will get that back as well as you crank up your calories again after a fat loss phase. Should you adjust for my cut season as well? Not initially. And here's the thing, because we start with the calorie adjustments food-wise, right? I look at your daily steps, because here's the thing too, exercise doesn't burn that many calories. And this is another thing that might come as a surprise. But if you look at your total daily energy expenditure, how many calories you burn per day, 70% is just your body at rest, staying alive. Organs are working, heart beating, breathing, those kind of things. You know, digestion is 10%. Then you have non-exercise activity and exercise activity. Non-exercise activity is, which is what I'm doing right now with my hands, walking, anything that's not like purposeful, like going to the gym, getting a workout in, right? That's non-exercise activity, just normal movement. That's 15% of your day. And then only 5% comes from exercise. And that's a huge one. Can we technically bring that up by doing more cardio? Yeah, of course, right? However, at the end of the day, it's not going to be that much. And a lot of times the body will kind of adapt and lower your non-exercise activity because we went so hard doing cardio. But either way, that's kind of like nitpicky, you know? I will say cardio can be a really nice tool. It can be almost kind of like a little bit of like fuel to the fire. You know what I mean? Could be, by the way, could be in a bad way, but also a good way. So that's why I don't add cardio, because I would much rather do this. Lower your calories from food, sustainably have you lose body fat, right? Then look at your steps. Can we get it up to 10K per day, not 10%, 10,000 steps per day, and keep you there so that we get the most out of your non-exercise activity? Because remember there, that's 15% of your day. That's the biggest chunk you can actually directly influence out of everything. Because BMR, you can't really do that, right? Not in the short term, at least. Long term, like by building muscle, not dieting too much, etc. But either way, non-exercise activity, which we track through your steps, right? Even though it's not all actual steps, but like that's how we track it. If we keep that at 10K, we know that we are in a really good place and you are moving. Here's the cool thing too. When we do that, we go for a walk and those kind of things, and we're just active. We burn more calories, but it's without the added stress response to the body. And that's a really key thing. Want to manage stress, dieting by itself is already a huge stressor to the body. Now, then, as for cardio, I like to keep it in. I think 20 to 30 minutes, 1 to 2 times a week. Assuming that stress is not very high, totally cool. If someone is highly stressed and there's a lot of shit going on, I'll probably pull them out and I'll remove cardio for the time being. Because we want to manage stress. That's the number one priority during a cut as well, right? We want to manage stress, and sometimes that does mean less HIIT, less cardio, those kind of things. But it really depends on the season and the person and your lifestyle, right? Are we kind of good? Hey, fine, you know? Then included. If stress is really high, we might be lowering it. But again, we'll talk about this stuff too. You're checking. That being said, what I want to add lastly is, so potentially we could be adding some cardio towards the end of a fat loss phase, or maybe when steps are dialed in already and targets and we don't want to lower food. Okay, let's maybe add more activity so that we can get away with more food for as long as possible. So that's maybe one tool we could do, right? So to your last part of the question, should I adjust or wait and see how my body responds? I would wait, see how the body responds, and then I will make the adjustments and recommendations based off how that works, right? And how that goes. And then maybe at some point we might even add a little bit, but for now, don't worry about it. And number one lesson here too, right? Let's not exercise for fat loss. We can supplement it. You know, we can make sure that we stay in a healthy spot. We can maintain the muscle, but we're not specifically doing it for fat loss, because that's a big mistake a lot of people make. It's also why a lot of people end up with a bit of a weird relationship to exercise and just it never lasts. You know what I mean? Now, next one. How many workouts per week are sensible during a cut while also working long hours, feeling a lot hungrier during the day after the workout and a lot more tired than usual? Yeah, totally makes sense. We will be feeling a little bit more hungry after a workout and a little bit tired as well, which is why the timing of your workout could be something to play with. I know, for example, when I have a really hard workout, especially on lag days, I'm not going to be able to like write content or those kind of things. You know what I mean? Like I'm not going to be able to like get shit done afterwards unless it's like social media stuff, which obviously, you know, I'm here in a group and, you know, I help people online and maybe like podcasts and stuff I'll do. But if I need to like write shit and I need to do like what's called like deep work, you know, like the important stuff, and I really want to focus, I don't do that after my workout, because like that workout really takes it out of me. But it is personal. I will say that, right? It is personal. And it depends on what's possible for you as well. You know what I mean? So getting into how many workouts is sensible during a cut. Again, a huge it depends question. I think as little as twice a week is enough to maintain muscle, technically. Is it less optimal? Yes. But again, we can, you know, always focus on being optimal. And yes, we would like to be in an optimal place. But at the end of the day, like we can't always have optimal. So it depends on the person, schedule, etc. I will say it's much easier for the body to hold on to muscle compared to building it initially. And I believe it might have even been a fifth. I can't remember for sure, so don't quote me on this, but I think it was something like a third or a fifth of the volume that's needed to build muscle is what you need to maintain muscle. And that's very little. So technically you could like train twice a week and be totally fine, right? I would even say that 3 to 4 times, like maybe 3 even, is it likely a very good place for most people to be. And again, I don't speak in absolutes, and it's very difficult to really give one statement here. And I know it's very vague, but I have to, because it's different for everyone in this group. But I will say 3 times a week is amazing. If you can get 3 really solid workouts in, you're good, right? I would say preferably, if it's possible for you, I would say 4 maybe. That's if I like would get the opportunity to pick and say, hey, everyone needs to work out this many times. Personally, right, what I think is likely best for most people, and use my words careful here, would be 3 or 4 weightlifting sessions and then maybe like 1 cardio day. And then maybe either 2 full rest days or like 1 active recovery day. But hey, also active recovery day, that's not a fucking marathon where we, you know, like rowing 20 kilometers. Like, no, that's an active recovery day where we go for a walk, we go for a hike or something, but nothing too crazy, you know what I mean? So to give you a general recommendation, I would have to go into your sheets to kind of see how much we're currently looking at. But what's sensible during a cut, you don't need as much. But I will say that it's likely good to get at least maybe 3 in, depending on where you've been. And I'm just opening up the sheet right now. But again, for most people, like let's say on average, kind of like a 4, that's super good. Now, I got your sheet here. So we're looking at, 1 second. Sabrina, analytics. We're looking at 1, 1, 1, 6, 3. Cool. So you see, like we're already increasing it. I think, yeah, 3 in that case, 2 to 3. Look, based off the numbers that I've seen in the sheet, you know, 2 to 3. That would be pretty good, I would say. It's just good to be active too, you know what I mean? So that's the thing. And then steps, of course. Steps is the main priority during a cut, and you've been above 10K for the most part, you know, the last couple of months. So if you can keep that up, like that's the most important thing. It's your nutrition, your steps, and then your training is really mostly, once again, to hold on to the muscle that you have, you know? Now, getting into how much sense does it make to save just about 50 calories a day And this is really cool because I actually wanted to bring this up in June with you all. So this is really cool. To save, for example, 50 calories per day during the week, to add them to the weekend. Yes, very good one. Is it better to have a steady intake? How does it influence the hunger levels? And then she says, I'm so happy you brought up the possibility of light soda drinks, by the way, because it's saving my mood most days for faking as a dessert. I mean, that's how diet sodas can really help. And again, there's a lot of fear mongering on just about everything on social media and in the your bigger media and stuff too. But it's really not that crazy. Like, as long as we don't drink liters of it every single day, it's totally cool. You know what I mean? And again, there is research to show that diet sodas can actually help you lose weight. And it's not because diet sodas are magical. It just kind of gives you something sweet. It's that carbonation that fills you up a little bit. And it's like a treat, like Sabrina says here. It's like it could be almost like a little dessert or something. You know what I mean? And it's really nice to kind of use those things as tools, right? Because anything we can do to make a cut easier. Because let's be honest, it's never really going to be fun. We're just trying to make it most manageable. Now, to our question about the 50 calories per day, kind of like saving it for the weekend. Yes, we can do that. And that's what's called calorie cycling, sometimes also called carb cycling. Calorie cycling. So here's the thing, guys. There's a reason why I have you track your targets, but that we see the average over the course of the week. At the end of the day, end of the week, technically, it's really just about your weekly average, like where you're at on a weekly basis. Your body is not necessarily like a 24-hour thing where now you're in a cut and now you're in a bulk or a surplus and whatever. Like, yes, you basically are, but it's the average, right? And that's why, because I got questions about this in the past where someone was like, hey, what if I spend a couple days a week in a bulk and then a couple of days a week cutting? Will I then build muscle and lose body fat more effectively? I was like, no, because it's about the week. And if anything, those 2 different days would almost put them just at maintenance. You know what I mean? And that's how you want to think about this. And that's why we track your average. So that being said, yes, we can do that. We can actually allow for more and then have a little bit lower during the week. And then that average comes back to your current targets, which is a tool that we could be using. I have some people do that, calorie cycling, right? And the cool thing is that in Chronometer, I can literally set that for you where there's 2 targets and it just alternates. And then we decide, hey, do you want to have 1 or 2 high days? And we schedule that in. And a lot of people like to do that on maybe Friday or maybe Saturday or even Friday and Saturday. But I will say, if you have 2 days, which by the way is totally cool, 2 days, of course, makes the weekdays a little bit lower even, right? So we do need to compensate. It's literally the same thing as going to Vegas and being like, hey, you know what? Like, I'm probably gonna spend a bunch of money, right? Or any trip for that matter. But like going to Vegas, the week or the month leading up to that, you'd probably save your money a little bit too, right? You'd be a little bit more of a cheap fuck to kind of like allow for more during that weekend. That's kind of like how you want to think about this, right? If we bring it back to finances, it all makes sense. It's the same shit. It's, hey, okay, cool. We know that during the weekend, we're going to spend some more calories. So let's save a little bit more during the week to allow for that. Here's a big one though. Don't take this out of context. I would say those higher days, they can be at maintenance. And that's what we typically do. Even in a deficit, I have people at maintenance for 2 days and then the rest of the week goes lower. That's a very useful tool. I don't want to see a 4,000 calorie day and I'm barely eating the next day though, right? Because if that's the case, and I'm not, this is not towards anyone, just generally speaking, but I don't want to see this being taken out of context. And this is something that once I record a video training on it, I'll bring that up too. But I don't want to see this, you know what I mean? Where it's like eating like an asshole and I'm barely eating it all. No, instead, hey, let's just have maintenance. Maintenance is plenty for a lot of people already. Like a lot of people even struggle eating at maintenance, right? Actually what the body needs. And then during the week, it's also kind of nice because we have that system, right? The week, you have your work and those kind of things. It's a little bit easier to kind of like be a little bit more strict or like more grindy, whatever you want to call it, right? A little bit more aggressive during the week. to then chill during the weekend. It's a very useful tool. I did want to bring that up. I potentially want to do a calorie cycling challenge, which I will say will be a little bit more advanced. But let's see, and it would be only in our community here, but not this month, I think. We'll see. We'll see when it makes sense, but we might be doing something like that. But I will for sure record a training on this where we will be diving into calorie cycling and how to do it, right? Because we can accommodate for this. So that's a very long answer of saying yes, you can do that. You can do that once a week, twice a week, as long as that average, is where your current targets are at. And as long as we don't take this out of context. Because honestly, if it's only a little bit of a difference, I'd much rather see someone just go back to their normal targets, right? Because we don't have to always compensate. That's my last point there. If we are cutting and we specifically go to maintenance for 1 or 2 days, okay, let's maybe accommodate for that. Or we have a wedding, a party, whatever, cool. If it's just a normal week and we just have a little more, then just get on with your week the very next day and don't worry about compensating, right? It really depends on kind of like the scenario. I will say that it's always best to do this ahead of time so that it's planned for, instead of saying, oh shit, I overate and now I have to make up for it. You know what I mean? Now, Caitlin had a couple questions. So let's see. First of all, I'm starting my first cut week today, and I have a 4-day vacation this weekend. Being thrown into the fire already, gotta love it. And she says, I'll be with family and in an Airbnb, so I'm able to take my preferred foods and will even be in charge of cooking a couple meals. If it's a shorter trip like this, what's the best approach to stay on track? Should I still accurately track, only focus on protein, no tracking at all, etc.? In addition to that, what about longer 7 to 10 day vacations? What approach is better for those longer durations? Really good stuff here. And this is something that's going to come up a lot now that we are heading into summer. A lot of good stuff. And you know what? I even want to bring this up. So bear with me. Let me just write this down. Because today we are recording a new Talk Nutrition podcast episode about summer and kind of like periodization around that, and like literally about this. So me and Christine will dive into this as well, and I will be bringing up your question there too. But okay, so with the cut, so it's a huge it depends question. I'm always a big fan of planning ahead and making sure that we kind of like make your nutrition kind of like fit into your life, and not the other way around, where it's like, oh shit, I'm on a diet, so now I need to flip everything and make my vacation fit into that. Like, no, it's the other way around. Kind of, okay, we have this stuff, right? Our life, and then nutrition kind of fits into that. Now, first of all, what do you want to do? I know that's a very vague answer, but like, what do you want to prioritize? Personally, I think we can try both. Either way, I'm always excited for these scenarios because I know, Caitlin, that you're going to learn something now. And I want you to know that there's no right or wrong here. We go into this testing something, then we collect feedback, data, and then for next time. So, to be honest with you, I'm going to have you make that decision. I'll explain a little bit more, but I'll have you make this decision. Because we're looking at kind of like a shorter trip, the 4 days, right? And then you have like 7 to 10 day vacations. Personally, I think for the vast majority of the people, we would just go with a more like intuitive maintenance kind of week or 2 weeks, whatever it is, for your longer trips, where the breaks and travels training comes in handy. So check that out if you haven't yet. And by the way, if you have watched it, go through it again, rewatch it, right? Because you're in charge with the decisions, right? And deciding what you want to focus on. Okay. I think for longer trips, honestly, I wouldn't even track. And this depends on the person. I've personally tracked on tour and stuff and on vacations just for protein, but like sometimes I haven't. I know some clients who like to, some people who don't, and I know people who say they will and then end up not doing it. They change their mind. You know what I mean? So, and either way, there's no right or wrong. I think for a shorter trip, depending on what kind of trip it is and how much you are willing to kind of, sacrifice, let's call it, and how much you think it's necessary. Because to be honest, we can always plan a break and be fine if it's 4 days, right? If we go to maintenance for 4 days, and then you could still choose to track or not. But if we go to maintenance for a couple of days, we can always pick up the cut afterwards, right? So that's the thing here. It's a difficult one to say. It's cool that you're going to be able to cook some meals and like have your preferred foods, and that's very good. But yeah, like, you know, family trip. Should you be tracking? Should you be dieting? Should you take a break? And maybe just focus on the things that we mentioned in both trainings, right? So eating away from home as well as breaks and travels. They're a little similar, but breaks and travels is more about these kind of scenarios where it's not just like an evening out or something, or, you know, going out for food or takeaway or those kind of things. But breaks and travels is more about, okay, you have the trip coming up. Let me set my goals. Let me get really clear on what I expect, because we cannot look at your usual day-to-day and vacations and expect the exact same outcome, right? It's going to be different. So we need a different approach. And what that approach is going to be, let's try, right? So I'd love for you to comment here maybe, or maybe just post in a group. Maybe you just do that, just post in a group. Just so like I get to see it with a notification. But like post in a group and say what you decide, and then we just try. And that goes for shorter trips or longer trips. I think as long as we go into this with a plan and we're aware of the plan and we just try and we don't expect perfection, we just look at this as a learning opportunity, you can then go into it stress-free. You can see how it goes. And honestly, I've seen a lot of people just go with a step target, protein with every meal, and like hydration or something, right? And again, it can be different, but those are kind of like the main ones that people really keep up, or, 2 servings of each fruits and vegetables. Like simple shit like that can really keep you on track really easily without making it complicated, you know? So I hope that helps. Let me know what you decide. And then once again, we just try. And I just had someone, one-on-one client, go on tour with this band, and he had a bit of a harder time, you know, cutting on tour. So knowing that he's going to go on tour again in 2 weeks, we said, hey, you know what? Like, it was a little difficult now. Let's now try something else. Let's aim for a maintenance kind of, week where we do still set, daily goals, habits, or, actions, I should say. But now we're going to try something else, and then we test that. And that's really all this is. We're going to go into it with a plan. We're going to see how it goes, collect data, and then make a future decision. Now, alrighty, let's see. Next one. On foods, protein. Yeah, so we covered all this stuff. So there's not like one best approach. It's different per person. I will say for the most part, we're probably not going to be dieting and those kind of things and tracking like during a trip, you know what I mean? So second part of that, she says, on a cut, should I aim for 8 to 10K steps or ramp it up? I would say, and let me just pull up your sheet as well. It's always kind of like easier to kind of look into it there. Let me see real quick, because technically it depends where you're at. I always say 8 to 10K is a great range to be in. And Caitlin has been around 8, 9-ish on average the last couple of months, which is really solid. Couple 11,000 weeks. I would say if we could hit 10K a day during the cut, that's really solid, right? So your non-exercise activity, once again, and we talked about that earlier, that's your main toggle in terms of directly influencing how many calories you're burning. And that's, that step count. That's how we measure it. It's not perfect, but that's our best kind of like way to track that. And there is also research behind like the 10K and stuff, which there's kind of almost like a discussion going on where people say like, oh, it's just marketing. Well, yes and no. It started in marketing, but there's a lot of research to back it up now too, to where all the way up to like 10K steps, 10, 11-ish, 12, there's like a benefit with every 1,000 steps, and then it kind of flattens out, So once we get to that spot, either way, fat loss or not, it's really good for your health, which is really cool too. Plus it's without that stress response. So that being said, I know you love hiking, so this should be an easy one for you. But I would say like based on your current numbers, at least 9, preferably 10. But what I also will say, same kind of thing as with the cardio we talked about earlier. I would say that it's probably best to not try to add a whole bunch because we already made that calorie adjustment from food, let's say like 9 or 10. And then potentially in the future, if we notice, hey, we're either getting towards the end of a cut, or we want to speed things up a little bit, or we want to, instead of lowering food, once again, we want to actually increase the steps, we can then use that as a toggle. So I'd much rather keep that in our back pocket so that we can potentially use that in the future and say, hey, let's go for 12K steps for the last 1 or 2 weeks, you know what I mean? Something like that, instead of already doing it and already playing that card, if that makes sense. And then lastly, from Caitlin, so I've been focusing on cross-training because I love the variety of movement and how it challenges both strength and endurance at once, along with being time efficient. And that's a really good point. 30 to 40 minutes, she says, you get a whole lot done. And that's a really solid way of training. Especially like if you're, if you don't have that much time, very solid, really good way to kind of get into that, or get it in, I should say, in terms of activity. She says, I know this type of training can be highly stressful on the body though. So is this an optimal way to train while I'm in a cut? Would traditional strength training be a better option? Obviously my goal for this cut is to lose body fat, not gain muscle. So I'm curious what the best approach would be. Good one. Things I don't see here is how often per week it is. But let me see in your sheet. We're currently around 4 times a week, which is pretty solid. I would say, because like, here's the thing too, I do talk about stress a lot. It's also not that it's always going to be like that crazy. It's just that, and I get these questions a lot too, but like, it's just that when someone, for example, is dealing with a lot of stress and, sleep kind of sucks, and they're also dieting, and there's also this going on, and also this, and they're also trying to do CrossFit like 6 times a week. It's like, okay, let's dial it back. To be honest with you, I do think that it's likely fine to just stick to 4 times a week. I think that's cool. But the only thing I would add here is to be aware of your parasympathetic activities, meaning your recharging things that you do, right? Long story short, like shit that we enjoy, shit that we like. Think about your iPhone, right? How annoying is it to charge it for a little bit, and then when it's 10%, you go out the door, right? It's kind of shitty. Like in no time, your battery's dead. You're like, fuck, or 20%, or you never really charge that phone fully. No, we want to start the day with that phone like fully charged, so we know we're good. You know what I mean? As silly as that sounds. A lot of people don't do that with their body. It's kind of like, hey, we charge the 10%, and it's kind of like, okay, let's get on with our day. Okay, cool. So, so that being said, bringing this back to stress management, what I like to do is look into people's overall stress load. And what you could do is make a little T-chart, so like this. And I learned this from Sam Miller, so you might even see that in his book. And then you say drains on one side and charges, my beautiful handwriting, on the other side, right? Drains and charges. And you start writing down the things that drain your batteries, like mentally as well as physically. And then you write down the things that recharge you, the things that make you feel good, that make you gain energy, recover, those kind of things. And look at those two. And just have an objective look, put it on paper, and really, like, don't do this in like 10 seconds, but like sit down, think about the shit, write it down, come up with everything that you can think of. Okay, these are all the things that, draining my batteries. These are all the things that recharging my batteries. Let's look at this objectively now, and what does it look like? Is it a little too much on the drain side? Okay, cool. Let's potentially lower volume if we really need to and we feel like we have to, right? Or can we maybe add some parasympathetic activity, like going for a morning walk, or doing some breath work for 5 minutes, or doing journaling or meditating, or those kind of things. And by the way, I know those are kind of like the go-to answers usually for stress management. But honestly, I mean, you see my guitar next to me usually, playing guitar, playing music, singing, dancing, I don't know, listening to music. There's so many different things. Some people like knitting and those kind of things, reading, puzzling, just literally anything. For me, favorite thing in the world is like being out in nature, hiking, camping, those kind of things, you know what I mean? Going out and just making a campfire, sitting by the coast. Like, that's the best shit ever, So those kind of things that and that's different per person, but the things that help you recharge. Can we add more of that? Cool. Then I would say the 4 times a week, you're cross training, the high intensity interval training, potentially CrossFit boot camp type of stuff. It's totally cool. You know what I mean? I think it's totally fine. Yeah. If we're looking at kind of like building muscle, probably weightlifting, right? In like a actual like a maintenance or muscle gaining phase, that would likely be best. I mean, overall as well, if you can get good workouts in 30 to 40 minutes and you do a circuit and you get a bit of strength and endurance, plus it's something that you like doing, I would keep that in, So that's my last point here. A lot of stuff we talk about online and in the podcast and those kind of things too, it needs to be very general, but there's also still a lot to be said about personal preference and those kind of things, So I hope that helps. And of course, let me know in the group what you want to do in terms of your vacations, the short trip, potential longer trips. And these all, by the way, guys, these are all things that you want to write down in your analytics sheet and write down in the week where you're going to be going, right? So for me personally, the last week of this month, I'm going to be out of office. And that's already mentioned multiple times. So just so you guys know, do that same thing for you, because then we can plan around your trips and those kind of things if we need to. Then next one. So Danny says, what's up? Calorie cycling. Yes. So that's related to what Sabrina said, kind of like banking your calories and spending a little bit more during the weekend, Is it possible to cut like 100 to 200 calories a day in a week and then maybe get those weeks or get those in the weekends? To feel like a refeed day / event / party. And he has some emojis there. Yeah, definitely. And I really like doing that. And it's a very good point that you brought up. So that's technically called a refeed day. You could have 1 or 2 refeed days. If we're looking at kind of like a full week of being at maintenance, or even 2 weeks, we would call that a diet break. But if it's short, it's like 1 or 2 refeed days, I just call them high days or just maintenance, you know what I mean? But yes, that is a good idea. And again, I do want to record a training about this, and I do want to potentially do something like a calorie cycling challenge for this as well, because I think it could just be cool for someone just to try that out. Now here's one big but, right? But I will say that I've seen people really struggle with one target already, let alone having 2 different ones, where all of a sudden now they need to hit higher calories during the weekends and they actually have a hard time getting that in. You know what I mean? So that being said, for some people, it's an incredible tool. It's very effective. If you like it and if it helps you stick to your maintenance or stick to your calorie deficit or include the parties, that's totally cool. For some people, it makes it more difficult. You know what I mean? Dave says, I like your thoughts on cutting if you think I'm ready for it. It all makes sense to me. Yeah. So we were kind of talking about, hey, okay, cool. Like when should we be planning, periodization plans, etc. So what I did in his sheet was, hey, okay, we could potentially go into a cut here, but I want to see these and these things in place because, and this is to everyone. Remember too, that especially in the beginning, when we are still getting you consistent, we are still working on getting familiar with the process, tracking. You still got to do your perfect day of eating. You still need to do your periodization plan, your homework, and those kind of things, right? You still are going through that initial phase. I am also still looking at, right, for multiple weeks, I am still looking at, okay, cool. So this is how you're doing with your tracking. This is how much you're actually getting in, right? This is what your body weight is doing. This is what your measurements are doing, right? A lot of people over the last couple of months, and this is going to come up with a lot of people in the future too. A lot of people were like, hey, what, like, okay, so now I'm eating more? And especially like for the first 2 weeks, it's kind of like, it's a little uncomfortable, you know? And then all of a sudden, sometimes for the first time in years, they start to lose body fat and they are now going down in pant sizes and stuff, you know what I mean? And that's all because we do that pre-work. But we also need to figure out, and it takes time, we need to figure out, okay, cool, we put you at a target. First of all, are you actually hitting the target? And then how is your body responding? Okay, now we can make it a decision. Because at the end of the day, guys, we could calculate your calories and macros and stuff, but it's still an estimation. And the only real way to find out your maintenance calories, or if you're in a deficit, is by trying and seeing how the body responds. And if that's then way lower and you're still not losing body fat, okay, we might have to look into some things. You might come from like a chronic dieting background or those kind of things, you know what I mean? So I hope this all makes sense. This was a really solid session.